Hi BookTube. So I'm finally back after my long trip in June. It was supposed to be a kind of sort of vacation, and it definitely turned out to not be a vacation because upon my arrival I tripped pretty badly and sprained my ankle. So I couldn't do anything, any sightseeing whatsoever except from the car, and even then I wasn't very comfortable because I had to keep my foot elevated, and I'm still dealing with that right now. That's why the settings a little bit differently, because I cannot sit on the floor right now because I wouldn't be able to get up. So I'm sat on a little perch, and speaking of perches, the phone which I'm filming on is very, very precariously stacked on what, 4 or 5 pillows. So hopefully you don't topple over. We'll see how this goes, but I'm trying to make it work and get back into the swing of things of filming videos. I had mentioned maybe, or had the thought in my head of wanting to vlog some of my trip, but yeah, that, needless to say, went straight out the window along with all of my other plans. But anyway, I'm very, very happy to be home. Not so much happy to be back at work, because like who would be after a couple of weeks off? It's been a bit of a mental struggle to get right back into work, especially since I work so early in the morning. I work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it can be difficult after not having to be tied to an alarm clock. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the books I read in June. Not all of the books, but most of them. So I have my little notebook here. I'm trying to get better at keeping track of the books, because I have on Goodreads, I keep track of the books I've read, but I don't categorize anything or put things in folders or anything like that, or have a spreadsheet. So I wanted to have like a better breakdown in this notebook. So in June, the readathon I was participating in was June on the Range, and I kind of manipulated that a little bit because it's, focused on Westerns, and I have so many nonfiction books on my shelves that are set in the West, or, discuss the nature or the sociological part of it, or the history. There's all sorts of things related to the West on my shelves, so I dabbled a bit here and there. Although I did read at least one like true Western novel. So yes, I read 5 books for June on the Range, and I read a total of 18 books. So it was 7 physical books, 7 ebooks, and 4 audiobooks. I read way more audiobooks than I have in the last, I feel like, at least year, and that was mostly due because I was doing a lot of driving and traveling, and then being at home like bedridden, like or recliner ridden. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and I didn't always want to have my eyes reading the words, and so yeah, that is why the uptick in audiobooks. And then I read 13 fiction books and 5 nonfiction. Okay, so I wanted to go over some of my favorites that I read. And so let's see here. I have some on my tablet here, because for the fiction, it's a reread. And I feel like for me, picking a favorite often is, I'm having to resist doing the rereads, but I didn't this month because for fiction, I liked Brownies and Broomsticks by Bailey Cates, and this is the first book in a magical bakery mystery. I picked this up after reading it many years ago, because I think there's rumors, if not, I can't exactly remember, I think there's at least 10 books in this series, and I think there's going to be an 11th book, and so, or maybe there's the 10th book coming out, something like that. But regardless, I saw someone talking about this series, and so it jogged my memory. Like, oh yeah, I really liked that series when I read it, so I wanted to give it a reread, and I do plan on reading the rest of the series as well. This is following Katie Lightfoot. Look at me remembering the name. Maybe because it's a reread, where it's sticking with me more. But Katie Lightfoot is moving from Ohio to help run her aunt's bakery and coffee shop, and she doesn't know until she arrives that there are things in her family's past that she wasn't aware of, and so she has these like magical abilities, but it's not necessarily like bewitched, like wiggle your nose or point your finger and things are gonna happen. It's more of like herbal stuff, and she gets in part of this group of witches, and they each have their own specialized niche in the magic. So some are like this like moon magic, some are with colors and all sorts of things. And so of course with her being with herbs and plants, she uses a lot of that in her bakery. And so what's up there? She's right beside me. She's ready to go out, I think. But it's been hot outside, so we're having to like decrease her walks. And again, with me, I can't walk at all. So, and she's a gigantic dog. So yeah, me not being sturdy on my feet and then having 85 pounds on the end of a leash is no good. But anyway, so yes, I really enjoyed this book, and I really like the series. It'll be interesting to see what my take is going forward, but judging how I liked it, you know, reading the first way, I think I'm going to enjoy reading all the rest in the series. But yes, she arrives in Savannah, Georgia, and just the setting alone, I just think, you know, it's like a magical place, even though I've never been there. I would love to visit, but just the name and just the feeling that it evokes. I don't know, like the imagery I have in my head. I feel like it would be a very pretty place to set a book or a movie or whatever. And so yeah, so she moves into this little like carriage house, and she meets, there's two possible love interests. There is a firefighter that her uncle used to work with, and then there is it's called a druid, which is like the wizard side, the male side of the female witch, I think, or the druid might be completely different than wizards. I don't know. I'm not like versed in any of this. But yeah, and so he, there's a connection there because, like, you know, she's just learning about her powers, and he seems to have a very, he knows, you know, he grew up in somewhere. She's completely surprised by all this. This is all new to her. So yeah, anyway, that was my favorite fiction book. And then for nonfiction, let me see here. My favorite was, it was a June on the Range pick, and it is by Teresa Jordan, Riding the White Horse Home, a Western Family Album. And I read last year for June on the Range, I believe, or if not the year before, but I think it was last year. She wrote another book, and is it mentioned in here, called Cowgirls? Yeah, Cowgirls, Women of the American West. And that was where she went around to interview many different women of the West, and it was like going back like, you know, 1900s on roundabout, and the people who are still living, because that book was written like a couple of decades ago. And so you she had like the, you know, the true account saying like the late 1800s, 1900s, and like that. And so it was a really it stood out to me. And so when I saw this book by her, I recognized Teresa Jordan's name, and so I wanted to give this one a go. And so this one is, instead of her interviewing like, you know, all these other cowgirls, this was her own experience growing up. And it's been a while since I read it, so I couldn't remember exactly the town, but it was somewhere in Wyoming. Let's see here. Yeah, I remember showing you this book back when I was doing my TBR, because there's a map, but the map is so faded outside of like this blue dot where her house is that you can't really make it out. But it did mention in the book, but I read this book at the very beginning of the month, so I can't exactly remember where it was. But yeah, I liked it. It's like a, you know, family account of what it was like growing up. And then a lot of it, like especially the second half, focused on how, you know, like so many other families, you know, like families she had talked to with the other Cowgirls book, is that it's really hard to keep these ranches or farms through the generations because of, you know, the rising cost of things. And so, you know, her family was struggling with like trying to keep this, you know, this homeland together. And, you know, some of it started being, you know, shaved off through the years, like the acres were getting smaller, and it was just more and more difficult to run. And then so much of it was put on the shoulders of the older generation, and, you know, their bodies were kind of like just breaking down in a way, you know, after all those, you know, decades of dedication to this. And so, because it's just like a lot of, you know, hard labor. And so, yeah, and so she struggled with, you know, knowing it, even though she had so much passion for it, you know, she couldn't keep it herself. And so that was very interesting. And then to read about kind of like a dying town, because they had this like reunion for everyone in the town, but like so many people had moved away or died, and so there was only like a handful, and you could just see that, you know, this town was just going to be swept away and like becoming, I think, like a mining area. So yeah, that was interesting to read. But I liked the mix of things, because you had, you know, the history of the land and her upbringing along with the current day struggles. Although it's not exactly current day. This came out in 1991, so still relatively current day. Okay, so then let me see. That was my favorite book for June on the Range and for the nonfiction. And then, oh, I think I had one other book in here. So now that I did my favorites, I just wanted to mention a couple other books that I read that I thought were interesting. So I read a graphic novel, Dante's Inferno, and it is a graphic novel adaptation by Paul and Gatine Brizzi. And I have never read, turn the brightness down a little bit so you can see better. I've never read Dante's Inferno or any of the other parts of the trilogy. I've heard of it, of course. I feel like, and I've known about bits just through, I don't know, like the current lingo of thing. I don't know, but I didn't know anything about. No, it's like, I feel like too dark for me. Brighten it up a little bit more. But the art in this was just absolutely stunning, and as he's going through the different levels and the different struggles as he's making his way through this, and yeah, it's all in black and white, but I just thought it was a very well, again, I've never read Dante's Inferno, and nor have I ever read any of the adaptations, so I can't say this is the best one or anything like that, or that it did a good job. But for the experience in and of itself, it was really really well done, I thought. And then I want to touch on some of the physical books that I read, because I did read 7 of them, and a lot of them were June on the Range related. Let's see if there's any others that aren't June on the Range. There's these 2 right here that aren't. So I read Thornhold by Mary Stewart. This is seems to be like a gothic romance in a way, but unfortunately it disappointed me to a certain degree, because although this had lots of atmosphere and potential, it didn't deliver on it. So this is following Gilly Ramsey, and her aunt dies and leaves her this big house out in the countryside. Does it say where it is? In the cottage in Wiltshire, and it's very much in like this like sheep farmland area, and it's kind of spooky because there's possible like dead dogs and cats and pigeons, so it's like someone's doing like ominous things going on. So she moves to this house, and she gets to know the neighbors, and she's like, is this woman beside me wanting to poison me? Because some of the other neighbors like, don't eat her food, don't drink anything, don't eat anything she prepares for you, or bad things are going to happen. So it has these like touches of bad, of possible bad things, but it just never delivered that punch that I kept expecting. And I didn't want this to be like overly dramatic, because I have read like these gothic stories where it's very dramatic, but it just left me lackluster. It was just a lackluster book. And then the other book that wasn't June on the Range related is when I got back from my trip with my poor ankle, I wasn't in the headspace to do much of anything, so I read, not this one in particular, but I just read a whole slew of the Sweet Valley High books, because on my trip I did find a stack of them at a used bookstore, and so it gave me the push to read some of these to catch up, because those books, because this is a long running series, and I think right now I read books 17, 18, and 19, I think, something like that, and there's like over 100, and the books that I got in that series I picked up were books like 99 through 110 or something, so I have a ways to go before I can actually read those. But I just want some mindless reads, and they're all like, these books are set in like Southern California and Los Angeles area, and it's following 2 twins who are just they're very different. One is very studious and gets straight A's, and the other one just loves drama and chit chat and just wants to socialize with her friends, and they just kind of like butt heads in a way, or really the party girl is constantly pulling in the studious one and getting her pulled into all sorts of trouble. But it does follow other people in the high school. So yeah, it was like, these are all rereads for me, because I read these as a kid, and so I just wanted like the mindless zone out, like popcorn, like I'm watching reruns on TV, something like that. So those are the non June on the Range books, and so then I have a stack of books that I read for June on the Range. So we have Opportunity Montana, Big Copper, Bad Water, and the Burial of an American Landscape by Brad Tyler. And this is his story of he moves from Texas to Montana in Missoula, and just falls in love with all of the possibilities with the nature around him and the Clark River. And talks about how he's constantly boating through that, and then through his excursions he finds out about all of this pollution that's going on in Opportunity, Montana, and then also Anaconda, I believe, as well. And he talks about Butte, Montana, and all of that. And so I really liked the concept of this book and the topic, but just the writing itself didn't, I mean, not that it didn't sell me on the topic, because I didn't need selling on it, but just it could have, I feel like in another person's hands, if he took all his ideas and all his research and gave it to someone else, I feel like someone else could have made it a little bit more compelling, because I was feeling bored a bit here and there, and I didn't need to. I mean, I feel like I've read other books like this and I wasn't bored, so it's not that I'm not interested in the topic or the landscape or anything like that. But yeah, I just feel like it could have been done a little bit better. And when I looked up this author, because he's a new to me author, I don't think he's wrote any other books, so maybe this was like just a passion project, and maybe it hadn't had enough experience writing. I don't know, but the cover is pretty enough, and yeah, I like this topic. Well, speaking of covers, this is all that's left of this other book, because it was this is a old paperback, and it fell out. And it was like disintegrating, because it was like this old like dry glue. And this book was came out in the 70s, my particular edition, and the glue was just barely hanging on, and it was cracking and crumbling, like dropping through this onto my lap as I was turning the pages. I was like, oh my goodness, I've never had that happen before with a book. But yeah, so this is all that's left, and this is Hardscrabble: Observations on a Patch of Land by John Graves. And this is about his story of he grew up in Texas, moved away, and then came back, and has this passion for the land and love of the land. And so even though it's very dry, it's in between Dallas and Austin, but off to the west, so it's like right beyond the 30-degree parallel, where it's you get much less rain, or like less than 30 inches of rain, something like that, something with 30 in the title. If I had the book, I could have showed you the map, the graph where he was showing the geography of the area, and where certain areas were getting enough rain to sustain crops and the other wasn't. But yeah, that book is long gone now, because it doesn't exist anymore. It was just, it ended up being like individual pages, like 300-page book. Anyway, so yeah, I really like this book, and you could just like tell how much he cared about it, even though he talks about it's like very dusty, and people who had owned this land previously, and not just his particular plot, but the whole area was just like very much used up as they were going along, making their way west. And he's like, in the particular area that he was settled in, the previous settlers were like very much a poorer class of people that were making their way through, and so they were just like I guess he was talking about how they didn't care enough about it, or they didn't have the money or funds to do anything about it. But the way he talked about it, it's like even if they had the money and the funds and the will and the time, maybe it would never have been like this lush garden area, because again, it's like past that line where you don't get enough rain. So how lush can you make it be? I don't know. But I shouldn't get hung up on that, because his writing was really good. And when I looked up this author, because this is another new to me author, he has written multiple books all about Texas. And so if you want a book about like Texas, and this would be a good one if you want to know more like the nature and the landscape and how people live on the land kind of thing. And then the last book is a actual Western book. This is Great Tales of the West, introduction by John Jakes, compiled by Bill Pronzini and Martin H. Greenberg. And I just love this cover. I found this at a Little Free Library, I think, during Independent Bookstore Day, during that day. Or maybe I found it at a library book sale, or library bookstore sale, one or the other. But I found it fairly recently, and the cover is what captured my eye. But then also, there are so many authors here that are known Western writers, and they're all like really good, like Max Brand and Zane Grey, A.B. Guthrie Jr., There's O. Henry and Louis L'Amour, Elmore Leonard, Jack London, Mark Twain, Owen Wister. And so all of those I have read before. The other ones were new to me. But I like these kind of collections where you get introduced to other Western writers. Yeah, it's hard to, give a review on something like this, but yeah, it was a chunky book, but it was fun to read something that I had just recently picked up. So I like that, and I want to continue doing that for sure, and getting through all these books. But yeah, we'll have to see what I get up to in July. But anyway, I hope to have a better July, more calm, and have my foot recovered. So and yeah, just feel like a little bit more rejuvenated, because this trip, this long time off wasn't exactly what it was supposed to be. But yeah, hopefully July will be better, and yeah, we'll see. With the heat and everything, it's not always as fun. Like right now, I got back from my trip and I haven't put my air conditioners in, because in Portland, Oregon, I feel like no house comes with central AC and heat. But it's pretty hot today. I'm sweating right now because I had to close my windows when I was filming this for all the noise. And so anyway, I'm just gonna keep rambling. So I'll let you go, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.